When we talk about trauma bonding, the first stage is what often feels like the most beautiful, magical beginning. It's the part that tricks us because it doesn't look dangerous at all. In fact, it feels like everything you've ever wanted. It's the fairy tale beginning, and that's what makes it so convincing. When you first meet this person, it's fireworks, it's passion, it's intensity turned all the way up. They shower you with attention, with affection, with promises that sound too good to be true. And in that moment, you don't think twice because honestly, it feels amazing. You think, finally, someone sees me. Finally, someone values me the way I deserve. And here's where it gets tricky. This stage isn't accidental. It's designed. They're not just falling for you in the way it seems. They're setting the hook. By overwhelming you with so much love and adoration at the start, they create a baseline in your mind. They make you believe that this is what love looks like. Big, loud, all-consuming. They'll text you constantly, call you, send long messages about how you're the best thing that's ever happened to them. They'll talk about the future with you in week one, sometimes even day one. And because it's flattering, because it feels like connection, you let your guard down. Now, real love builds gradually. It grows roots over time. But trauma bonding doesn't start like that. It starts with an explosion. And explosions, by nature, aren't stable. But in the beginning, you can't see that. All you see is someone who makes you feel like you've finally found home, and you hold on to that feeling tightly, because deep down, we all want to be chosen. We all want to feel special. This is why it's called the false fairy tale beginning. Because that fairy tale is an illusion. It's a performance, but it's so convincing, so intoxicating, that it clouds your judgment. And let's be honest, when someone's telling you everything you've always wanted to hear, your brain doesn't stop to question if it's real. It just says, don't mess this up, don't let this go. That's how powerful the first stage is, and this is where dependency begins, not in the middle of the relationship, but right here at the start. They set the bar so high, so fast, that every part of you starts craving that same intensity. You get hooked on the rush. It's like a drug. The dopamine, the adrenaline, the validation. It floods your system, and what happens when your brain gets flooded with that? It starts chasing the feeling. You don't even realize it, but you start attaching yourself, not to the person, but to the emotional high they're creating in you. That's why, when things shift later, when the intensity fades or turns into something darker, you still hold on. Because you keep comparing everything back to this first stage. You keep thinking, but they loved me so much in the beginning. I know that person is still in there. You keep waiting for the fairy tale to come back. And that's the hook. That's the trap, because the fairy tale wasn't real. It was bait. It was the mask they wore to gain your trust. It was the performance they gave to secure your attachment. And once that attachment is strong enough, the mask slips. And that's when the cycle begins. But it all starts here, in the false fairy tale beginning. And if you don't recognize it for what it really is, you'll spend months, sometimes years, trying to get back to something that never actually existed. The beginning isn't love, it's the setup. You said, expand key point 2 into a 600-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact and don't mention. Jefferson Fisher, name and write it like Jefferson Fisher, is giving speech chat, GPT said. After that fairy tale beginning, something subtle starts to shift. It doesn't happen all at once, and that's what makes it so hard to catch. At first, it feels small, almost harmless, like little adjustments in how you live, how you talk, how you move through your day. They might suggest what kind of clothes you look best in, or which friends they don't really like you hanging around. Maybe they question how often you talk to your family or how late you stay out. And because they wrap it in concern, I just care about you. Or, I just want what's best. You don't label it as control. You label it as love. But what's really happening is dependency is being built, piece by piece. And dependency doesn't usually feel like chains. It feels like comfort. It feels like leaning on someone who always has an opinion about what's good for you. And in the beginning, you convince yourself that maybe they see something you don't. Maybe they really are protecting you. So, you let them decide, you let them influence, you let them slowly become the filter through which you see yourself and the world around you. This is where the bond deepens, not through love, but through reliance. And here's the danger: once you start relying on someone else to tell you what's right, what's safe, what's acceptable, you begin to lose trust in your own voice. You start second-guessing yourself. You pause before making decisions because you wonder how they'll respond. And soon enough, their approval becomes the compass for your entire life. Think about it. When they say, "I don't like when you talk to that person," you drop the friendship, not because you wanted to, but because you wanted peace. When they say, "I don't think that job is good for you," you hesitate, not because you doubted yourself, but because you didn't want to upset them. And each little compromise feels insignificant in the moment, but together they stack up into something massive. Now, here's why it works so well. It's not all bad. In between these moments of control, they still sprinkle in affection, kindness, or compliments. So, you don't see it as manipulation, you see it as balance. You tell yourself, yeah, they can be protective, but they also love me so much. They're just looking out for me. That's how dependency hides. It dresses up like care. And soon, your world starts shrinking without you even realizing it. You stop doing things you used to enjoy. You stop seeing people who once made you feel alive. You stop trusting your own instincts, and what's left, them. They become the center of your world, the main voice you listen to, the one you seek approval from. That's the plan. That's how the bond gets stronger. And let me be clear, this doesn't make you weak. It makes you human, because when someone builds that false fairy tale beginning and follows it with just enough love to keep you hooked, your heart naturally wants to trust. Your heart naturally wants to believe this is the person who has your best interest at heart. But love doesn't strip away your independence. Love doesn't require you to silence your own voice. Love doesn't create dependency, it creates partnership. So when you start noticing that your choices, your friendships, your freedom are shrinking under the weight of someone else's opinion, you have to pause and ask yourself, is this love, or is this control dressed up as care? Control is never love. It's the slow erosion of who you are. You said, expand key point 3 into a 600-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact and don't mention Jefferson Fisher, name and write it like Jefferson Fisher. Is giving speech chat, GPT said. By the time you've been swept into the fairy tale beginning and pulled into that quiet dependency, the relationship moves into a place that feels like confusion. This stage is where your mind starts spinning, where you no longer know what to expect from one day to the next. One moment they're kind, affectionate, and attentive, just like they were in the beginning. And the very next, they're distant, cold, or even cruel. That inconsistency is not an accident. It's the glue that keeps you stuck. See, our brains are wired to chase patterns. When something feels predictable, we know how to navigate it. But when kindness is followed by neglect, when love is followed by punishment, when laughter is followed by silence, you start questioning yourself more than you question them. You wonder if you did something wrong, if maybe you triggered their mood, if you're the problem. And in that confusion, you start working harder to fix it. You start chasing their approval. This is why inconsistency is so powerful. If they were always cruel, you'd leave. If they were always loving, there'd be no cycle. But the push and pull keeps you locked in. You remember how incredible it felt when they adored you in the beginning, and every glimpse of that now feels like proof that it can come back. You cling to the highs while minimizing the lows, convincing yourself that the love is still there. It's just hidden under stress or bad days or misunderstandings. What's really happening, though, is reinforcement. Every time they show you affection after treating you poorly, it teaches your brain to link the two together. It says, if I hold on through the pain, the love will return. That's the same wiring behind addiction. The reward doesn't come consistently, so the craving only grows stronger. And without realizing it, you're no longer in love with the person. You're addicted to the hope of their good side showing up again. And here's where confusion digs even deeper. Because during this stage, they often shift blame back onto you. If they pull away, it's because you weren't attentive enough. If they get angry, it's because you said the wrong thing. If they go silent, it's because you didn't meet their expectations. And because you're already doubting yourself, you believe it. You start bending, apologizing, and changing just to keep the peace. You walk on eggshells, not realizing the floor you're walking on doesn't actually exist. It's one they created. You end up in a constant state of guessing. Guessing what mood they'll be in, guessing what words are safe, guessing how to bring back the version of them you fell for in the beginning, and the longer you stay in that guessing game, the more exhausted you become. Because your mind isn't at rest, it's always working, always analyzing, always searching for the formula that unlocks consistency. But there is no formula. That's the trap and the heartbreaking part. Sometimes those moments of kindness are so good, they make the chaos worth it in your mind. That hug after an argument, that apology that feels sincere, that rare moment when they look at you like you're the only person in the world. It makes you forget the pain just long enough to keep you tied. That's how the cycle feeds itself. You think you're chasing love, but what you're really chasing is clarity. You just want it to make sense. You just want the good to stay. And as long as you're searching for consistency in someone who thrives on inconsistency, you'll always end up confused, drained, and doubting yourself. Confusion isn't love. It's the beginning of losing yourself. You said, expand key point 4 into a 600-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact and don't mention Jefferson Fisher, name and write it like Jefferson Fisher, is giving speech chat GPT said. This stage is where the ground beneath you really starts to shift. Up until now, you've been caught between highs and lows, trying to figure out why things don't line up the way they did in the beginning. But when gaslighting enters the picture, the confusion goes from frustrating to disorienting. This is where reality itself starts to feel shaky. Gaslighting isn't just lying. It's rewriting your experience, twisting what happened, and making you question your own memory, your own perception, even your own sanity. It can look like small things at first. You bring up something they said, and they respond with, "I never said that, you're remembering wrong." You tell them how an action hurt you, and they reply with, "You're too sensitive, that didn't happen the way you think." And instead of standing firm, you start to wonder, maybe they're right, maybe I misunderstood. That's the power of gaslighting. It doesn't just deny your feelings, it makes you doubt whether those feelings are valid in the first place. And here's the thing, when you already care about someone, when you've already been hooked by that false fairy tale, beginning and lulled into dependency, you want to believe them. You want to trust that they mean well. So when they rewrite reality, you let it slide. You tell yourself it's miscommunication, or maybe you really did get it wrong. You stop trusting your instincts, and slowly, their voice becomes louder than your own. Over time, Gaslighting turns you into someone who apologizes for things you didn't do. It makes you feel guilty for emotions you were right to have. It makes you hesitant to bring up issues because you've learned that doing so will only get flipped back on you. And the longer this goes on, the more you feel like you can't trust yourself at all. Imagine how heavy that is, to feel like your own mind, your own memory, your own gut is unreliable. That's exactly the space gaslighting is designed to create. And let's be honest, once you're in that space, it's not just confusion anymore, it's captivity. Because if you can't trust yourself, then who do you rely on? The very person who's causing the damage. That's why gaslighting is so effective. It deepens the bond, but not in a healthy way. It keeps you tethered to the one who's undoing you, because they convince you that without them, you can't even see the world clearly. Now, let's talk about what this does emotionally. Gaslighting erodes your confidence. It makes you shrink, not just in the relationship, but in life. You stop speaking up at work because maybe your ideas aren't good enough. You stop leaning on friends because maybe you really are too dramatic. You stop looking in the mirror with certainty because maybe you don't know yourself as well as you thought. That doubt leaks into every part of your life until you're not just questioning the relationship. You're questioning who you are. And that's the cruelest part. Because when you lose trust in yourself, you feel like you've lost your anchor. And when you've lost your anchor, you're much easier to control. That's exactly the point of gaslighting. It's not about disagreement. It's about dominance. It's about replacing your reality with theirs. You see, love doesn't need to erase your perspective to stand strong. Real love makes room for two truths, two voices, two experiences, but gaslighting allows only one voice, theirs. And if you're in that space where your thoughts no longer feel like they belong to you, it's not love holding you there. It's manipulation dressed up as concern. You said expand key point 5 into a 600-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact and don't mention. Jefferson Fisher, name and write it like Jefferson Fisher, is giving speech ChatGPT said. This is the stage where the cycle begins to show itself clearly, though when you're inside of it, it doesn't feel like a cycle at all. It feels like survival. It's the stage of hurt and hope, and it's the most exhausting part of trauma bonding because it keeps you swinging back and forth between pain and relief. At its core, it looks like this. Tension builds, there's an explosion, and then comes the apology. That pattern repeats itself so many times that eventually it starts to feel normal. The tension phase is when you sense something is off. Maybe they're quiet, irritated, or short with you. You can feel the air shift. Your body goes on high alert, waiting for the next blow up. You start monitoring their tone, their body language, every little move they make, just so you can prepare. And in that stage, you're anxious, uneasy, and constantly second, guessing what you should say or do to keep things from getting worse. Then the explosion happens. Sometimes it's yelling, sometimes it's insults, sometimes it's silence that cuts deeper than words. Other times it might be physical. Whatever it is, it's the breaking point you are bracing for, and when it hits, you feel like everything is crumbling. You feel small, powerless, and stuck in a storm you can't control. But then, almost like clockwork, comes the apology. The apology stage is where hope sneaks back in. They might cry, beg, or promise to change. They might remind you of how much they love you, or say things like, "I just lost my temper. It won't happen again." They might even admit their flaws in a way that feels so honest. It makes you believe change is really possible. And because you love them, because you want that fairy tale version of them to return, you forgive. You let your guard down, you accept the apology as proof that the good outweighs the bad, and for a little while things actually do get better. They're sweet again, attentive again, kind again. They show up like the person you first fell for. That brief return to the fairy tale is what keeps you holding on, but it never lasts. Slowly, tension starts building again. The silence creeps back in. The little criticisms start returning. And before you know it, the cycle has reset itself. What makes this stage so damaging is the way it attaches hope to pain. Your brain learns to connect the apology and the relief with the very hurt that caused it. It starts to believe that love is supposed to feel like this, that love is about enduring the storm so you can enjoy the calm afterward. And that's not true love, that's conditioning, that's trauma bonding. Over time, this cycle wears you down. You start to feel like leaving is impossible, because each apology gives you just enough fuel to keep going. You tell yourself, maybe this time will be different, maybe this time the change will last, but deep down, you know the pattern, you've seen it repeat again and again, and the more you stay, the more those highs and lows start to define your understanding of love. That's why breaking this stage is so hard, because you're not just breaking free from a person, you're breaking free from the false belief that love has to hurt before it heals. Real love doesn't demand you suffer before you deserve kindness. Real love doesn't tear you down just to build you back up again. Hurt followed by hope is not love. It's a cycle that steals your strength while making you believe you're holding on to love. You said, expand key point 6 into a 600-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact and don't mention. Jefferson Fisher, name and write it like Jefferson Fisher. Is giving speech ChatGPT said. By the time you've walked through the fairy tale beginning, the quiet control, the confusion, the gaslighting, and the endless cycle of hurt and hope, it can feel impossible to find your way out. That's what trauma bonding is designed to do. It's meant to keep you so entangled that you believe you can't leave, or worse, that you don't deserve to. But here's the truth. The first step in breaking this bond isn't about running. It isn't about cutting ties in a single moment. It starts with awareness, because once you can name what's happening, once you can see the cycle for what it really is, you take away its power. Awareness doesn't always come like a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's the moment you realize you don't laugh like you used to. Sometimes it's noticing how much of yourself you've silenced just to keep the peace. Sometimes it's when you replay conversations in your head and finally admit, that wasn't love, that was control. Those little sparks of clarity matter. They're the cracks in the wall that's been built around you, and once you see even one crack, you can't unsee it. The challenge is, even when you know it's toxic, even when you know it's not love, the pull doesn't disappear overnight. Because your heart remembers the fairy tale beginning. Your brain still craves the highs. You still hope the apology will finally stick. That's what makes leaving so hard. You're not just breaking free from a person. You're breaking free from an illusion, from a dream you wanted so badly to be real. And grieving that loss is part of the process, but awareness shifts everything. It allows you to separate what's real from what's false. It allows you to say, this isn't love, this is manipulation. This isn't safety, this is control. This isn't consistency, this is chaos. And when you start calling it what it is, you begin to rebuild trust in yourself. You begin to realize that your voice matters, your memory is valid, your feelings are real. That's the beginning of freedom. And here's something important. Breaking the bond doesn't always happen in one dramatic decision. Sometimes it looks like small acts of reclaiming yourself, saying no to something you'd normally give in to, reaching out to a friend you stopped talking to, writing down your experiences so you can see the truth in your own words. Each small step is proof that you're not powerless, that you're stronger than the cycle wants you to believe. It's also worth remembering that love doesn't demand you lose yourself to keep it. Love doesn't thrive in secrecy, in fear, or in confusion. Love adds to who you are. It never subtracts. And once you hold on to that truth, it gets easier to see that what you've been enduring isn't love at all. Breaking a trauma bond takes courage, yes, but it also takes patience with yourself, because you're not weak for staying. You were conditioned to stay, and you won't be weak for leaving. You'll be reclaiming the strength that was yours all along. Awareness is the beginning of clarity, and clarity leads to courage. And courage is what finally breaks the chain. The bond loses its grip the moment you decide to call it by its real name.